You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Laura Adams, who's a personal finance expert, and she's the author of a fantastic book called Money Girls, Smart Moves to Grow Rich. Laura, real pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
So who'd you write the book for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I really wrote the book for the typical Money Girl podcast audience. I had started the show and had gotten a lot of questions about a variety of topics from retirement to taxes, insurance. And I really wanted to address that typical sort of podcast audience that I'm used to. And it's really anybody, I'd say, from 20s up to age 50, men and women. A lot of people think, oh, it must be geared toward women because it says Money Girl. Mm-hmm. But it's really geared for everyone who's interested in learning about money. Or maybe you've already got a really good base, a good foundation, but you just want to take it to the next level and, really get a little bit more serious about financial security and happiness.
All right. Before we get into some of the details of what you teach, having also written a number of books on personal finance, I'm always curious about how the authors deal with the writing of it. How did you develop the ideas and ultimately get it on paper?
Yeah, I had a pretty unique situation in that my publisher, which is Macmillan, they were not really very specific with me. It was kind of like, write a book, So I had a lot of freedom about what I wanted the table of contents to look like. And that was wonderful, but also, a little unnerving at the same time, sort of creating something. And then a year later, you submit it and you hope that they like it and everything looks good. I really wanted to address sort of the main pillars of finance. I really wanted to talk about the things that I felt like would affect most ordinary people. And I just sort of went from there. Like I said, it was really geared toward the typical audience that I see on Money Girl. So yeah, writing it, I had a lot of freedom and flexibility, which was terrific.
All right. So now let's dive in a little bit more because you spend a huge amount of time educating people about personal finance. What's one area or maybe the top area that you think people need to learn more about?
Yeah, I certainly get a lot of questions about credit. I get a lot of questions about debt. And of course, those are very related. Credit, this is an issue where folks are just confused. I find that people don't really understand this kind of underground world of credit and how lenders use credit and even how insurance companies use credit to evaluate you. And it's really something that's growing in importance. So more and more companies, merchants are going to be using credit to evaluate you. So, not only is it going to affect what you pay for a credit card, the interest rate that you're charged, but it affects things like what you pay for car insurance. So those issues can come as a surprise to some consumers. And it's a little controversial. A lot of people think, well, that's kind of unfair. Why should I be, judged based on my history? Does that really make sense? And whether you like it or not, that is what it is. It's the financial landscape. So we kind of have to play within those rules. So I love helping people sort of get clarity on credit.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. There's a whole philosophy, and frankly, I buy into it in a big way, that people should, as little as possible, use debt and try to live an existence where they only pay for things that they can afford on a current basis. So these are going to be people who maybe use debit cards or checks or cash. And they're in the plus in the bank all the time, but they don't really have much going on in their credit score because they just don't deal much with credit. How does that affect them?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it does affect you negatively. If you are in a situation where you will never ever need credit, that's wonderful. That's okay to say, hey, I don't want to borrow for a home, or I don't want to borrow for a house or a car. More power to you, if you have the savings to make those big ticket purchases with cash. But there are, the majority of people out there who do want a mortgage. They do want to buy a big ticket item, and they do want to finance it wisely. Certainly never financing more than you can afford. But the issue comes into play with credit, where it's affecting things that have nothing to do with debt, like your insurance rate, like getting an apartment. Those things are also going to be a part of your credit profile, and folks are going to look at you and say, "Oh, a thin file or no file," and unfortunately, that can hurt you. With that being said, I think there are really smart ways to use credit if you do want to build your profile and you do want to build credit. Certainly, there are ways to do that without going into debt. You never need to go into debt to build credit.
I think that's a very important lesson. We're talking with Laura Adams, who gives lots and lots of important lessons, not only through her book, Money Girls, Smart Moves to Grow Rich, but through her podcast, and she appears all over the media, everywhere from Fox to USA Today. Laura, we've been talking a little bit about credit and debt, but one of the other issues that I find in my day job as a financial advisor is that I'll talk to people about saving and the importance of building up. And, I can give the whole story about compound interest and why, if a penny saved today is really going to grow over time. And, well, at the end of the day, people say, yeah, Doug, great idea, but they're just such crummy savers. What is it that we in the financial professional world can do to encourage people to realize that saving and investing is such a critical part of long-term financial success, not only on paper, but you actually have to do it?
Yeah, it's so, this plays into our human nature. We like to have immediate gratification, whether that's, buying things with our money or eating something that maybe we shouldn't be eating. We love to have immediate gratification, and it takes a lot of maturity and emotional intelligence to say, I'm not going to buy that thing. I'm going to go ahead and save that money for retirement, because I know that in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it's going to mean a lot more to me then than it will today. And I think helping consumers really see the numbers, when you see those numbers in black and white and you go, wow, I could have a couple $1,000,000, if I only invest X amount per month, that can really get people excited. And until they really see those numbers play out, because certainly not everybody likes math, not everybody, is capable of making those projections and understanding it. So if you can demonstrate that for people in easy ways, just simple case studies, I think it's very eye-opening. I know it was for me, when I was young and just starting out and looking at saving and going, wow, I really can be a millionaire if I only do this. And staying focused on that long-term goal is not something that everybody is going to want to do or can do. But I think that's our challenge in the professional field, is to help people stay kind of excited and motivated about that long-term goal.
Yeah, it is tricky. People always have something else going on, and it's all just like with diet. Well, I'll start tomorrow. It's always a challenge. What technology have you seen that's been able to help people to improve their finances?
Yeah, I definitely love technology when it comes to finance, because I do think we can use it, to our advantage. And certainly younger people today, the millennial generation that are, on their we're all on our phones all the time, but the millennials are especially into technology and so comfortable with it. If they can use some of that technology now to set themselves up for the future, they will be in really, really good shape. So, there's things like the Acorns app. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Acorns is an app where it rounds up your purchases. So if I go out and spend $15.50 on my debit card, it will actually round it up to the next dollar and save that 50 cents to the point where maybe I've got $5 saved up and pending, and then it will invest that $5 once I've accumulated that amount. And, that's not something that is necessarily should be your only way to invest, but that's kind of an example of a way to automate savings so that you don't even have to think about it. It's just like, it's kind of happening in the background without you even really noticing. So I love things like that. And of course, even just things like retirement plans at work, where you're automating this stuff in the background. And if you don't have a retirement plan at work, simple bank transfers, it can be as easy as just setting up that monthly automated transfer with your online account. So all of those technologies are available, to all of us. I mean, we can all make transfers. We can all use an app like Acorns for the most part,
Mhm.
and just create those automated processes. Because I think that's really the key. I think setting it, not necessarily forgetting it, but setting it and letting it run its course. That is the key, because we're going to end up living on what is left over in our account. And when we prove to ourselves that we can do that, I think it makes it easier to just continue with that habit. If you put that habit into place, you're more likely to let it play out. And then before you know it, it's like, wow, I've got a really nice balance in this account and I didn't even have to think about it.
Right. I think exactly what you're saying is building the habits of success, and look at people who are in fact successful, and you'll find that in one way or the other, whether they're using technology or not, they do have these habits. Let's talk about one more thing, because you use the word retirement, and one of the topics that certainly comes up a lot for retirees is the low interest rate environment that we're living in now. And people say, Doug, when I worked, I always expected that I'd retire. I'd put my money in the bank and make my 5 or 6% interest, and now that's just not the case whatsoever. What sort of hope can you give to retirees listening to us today?
Yeah, it is frustrating for those folks that are having to deal with fixed incomes that are at a very low return. I think the one thing to consider is that the low interest rate environment is probably not going to last forever. It's been around quite a while. It's been around a lot longer than I thought it would last. I don't think it will last forever, but I do think that it's a great lesson for the folks who are preparing now. If we can say, you know what, I need to prepare in case I am only going to get a couple percent return in retirement. That means you've got to save more now. You've really got to put away those extra savings amounts on a monthly basis in order to prepare for it. And then if we get to retirement and the interest rate environment is better, it's more in our favor, then we'll just have that much more to spend in retirement. But I think we really do have to prepare for whatever environment is out there, and we just don't know what that's going to be. So I guess the key is to be conservative as you can, and really just try to prep. And if you're in retirement right now and you're dealing with those frustrations, I know my parents are in that situation. They're retired and definitely looking at, income that's less than what they had thought. They're still doing fine, but it's, not what they thought it would be. They're looking at some other things that are bringing them some higher returns. REITs and some other things have been doing well for them. So I think, diversifying, even if you're in retirement, is still the key, because you've got a long way to go. If you're 70 and you're looking at, wow, I'm going to live to my 90s, you've still got to have a little bit of risk in your portfolio in order to get that additional return you need to get you through those decades that are still going to come for you.
Right, and that's certainly the challenge, and that's why a lot of people, they'll put together a financial plan where their assets are divided in many, many different areas, and some will be higher risk, and of course, a big portion of the money when you're retired has to be in something that is going to be there tomorrow as well. Lori, we've really covered a lot, but unfortunately we're just about out of time. Tell us in the last few seconds, how can people follow you and follow your work?
I would love for folks to learn more about me on my site, which is lauradadams.com, and would love for them to get involved with the Money Girl community, which is a podcast and blog over at quickanddirtytips.com. So I hope to see you there.
All right, we will put a link to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Laura, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.